Omicron.
Omicron. Do you guys like my shirt? I'm like freaking Jenny Nicholson. Bam, right there. Here comes my dog, tippy tapping. Huckster! Sorry if I'm looking down a lot. I actually wrote a script and I didn't memorize it. So, that's what I'm looking at. If I'm looking down, it's at my script. Sorry, first big review. So I will work on that. But for now, yeah. Okay, so to start off this video, I'm going to tell you about how I found this book and came to be in possession of this specific copy, which is thoughtfully signed for Howard Stern. And no jokes about how Howard and I have similar hair. So not to give out too much personal information, but I have a very low tier, hourly, part-time job at a large media company which also employs Howard Stern. Now, being a media company, there sends a lot of ARCs or advanced review copies of books. These are often not well bound. The printing is off center. A lot of the photos just say photo to be added later because they're not meant for real sale. Now, because they get so many of them, a lot of them just end up in a giveaway pile in the break room. For instance, I got this very topical George W. Bush era political cartoon book, which I think is going to make a great coffee table and conversation starter if I ever get a coffee table or a friend to have a conversation with. And sometimes you just see a nice hardcover book that you know will be good for weighing down art projects while the glue dries. About a month ago now, I picked up this book for that purpose, but once I got back to my desk, I discovered the most genuine note from the author to Howard Stern, and I immediately became livid that it had so carelessly been disregarded. And so I started to do what I was angry Howard had not. I started to read. And let me tell you, once I started, I could not stop. This book is amazing, and so I decided to review it on my YouTube, which is not nearly the same as a plug from Howard, but hey, I'm here, it's something, and if you want to make this platform larger, feel free to subscribe while you're here. So right off the bat, I just want to put it out there, I'm not a book reviewer. I have zero professional qualifications to review a book, so don't take this video and review as anything more than an everyday person who read a book telling you their thoughts on that book. I am an avid lover of media in general. I would say media is my love language. Like if I recommend a movie to you, I'm showing you that I care. However, I am learning disabled and I do struggle with reading, so most of the media I favor is not written. I have read a lot more books recently during the pandemic. I started reading YA fantasy novels out loud to my daughter. I'm just saying all that so perhaps the other media I choose to reference in this review doesn't come off too random. That being said, something I thought was interesting is the pull quote on the front of the book, which specifically says, it's from an avid reader, says, "It has a little Stand By Me tossed in." Now this was interesting to me for two reasons. One, I'm a big fan of that movie and I don't see much comparison there. So I'd be interested to know why she felt that. And two, because Stand By Me is based on a book which I actually have read. And I feel there is more of a comparison to the book than the movie version. I'll try to keep this tangent short, but Stand By Me was based off a short story called The Body by Stephen King. It's a book of 4 short stories, which also includes the short story the movie The Shawshank Redemption is based on. Okay, I'll stop. I don't really have a point with this tangent. I just want to talk about how I had actually read one book so that when you watch this review, you're not just like, why is this movie buff telling me about a book? I read some books. It's difficult to summarize this story, but my best attempt would be to say that Omicron 6 is a story of 8th graders, Coop, spelled C-O-U-P-E, who grew up neglected and abused, but is plucky and outgoing, and Cooper, spelled C-O-O-P-E-R, who grew up with 2 loving, protective parents, but is perceived as nonverbal and often removed from his surroundings. The 2 both have different special abilities and discover they can connect on a telepathic level, at first being able to sense each other in their minds, and then later being able to communicate on a much deeper level. The book is split in two parts, and the first part mostly tells of Coop being taken in by Cooper's parents, Everett and Evelyn Callister, moving into their farmhouse and becoming a part of their family, as well as the growing connection between the two boys. The second part takes the boys out of the everyday and into Deep Woods Academy, where they learn more about where they came from and how they got their powers. That's the best, most simple, no spoiler summary of the book I can give. So if you don't want any spoilers and you just tuned in for a summary of the book and to find out if I like/recommend it, that's the summary. And yes, I like the book. In fact, I loved it and for sure recommend it. Get a copy of the Omicron 6 and read it. You won't regret it. And then come back and watch the rest of this video, as from here on out, I'm going to talk about the book assuming you've read it or are not planning on reading it and don't care about spoilers. Now, a lot of the marketing behind this book, just based on the cover, the pull quotes, the summary, seems to want to pitch it as some sort of superhero story, but I don't really see that. Yes, the boys have enhanced human abilities, which I guess is what superpowers are in the most basic sense, but to me, that's like calling Eleven from Stranger Things a superhero because she has enhanced human ability, which I don't think many people do. It's not what we in 2021 consider a superhero story. Speaking of Stranger Things, I think the media this book reminds me of the most is Stranger Things. And I know Stranger Things is just a hodgepodge of other previous media, but it's still the vibes I get reading this book. I also think the more original parts of Stranger Things are the areas where the most overlap between the book and the show occur. This is not to say that the book is in any way a copy of Stranger Things, just that if I were sorting media, I would put this book in the pile with Stranger Things and not in the pile with Marvel movies. However, I think Omicron is a much better science fiction story than Stranger Things. The book does a much better job of mixing the friendship in a small town, make you feel nostalgic for being a kid element, and the supernatural scientists making telepathic kids and mixing them into the population element. Whereas those feel like two separate things that come together in Stranger Things, those things are together throughout the entire story in Omicron, much to its benefit. I really like the Callisters and the comfortable feeling of their farmhouse. As I said, the first half of the book is mostly set in the farmhouse, which by description sounds like an unremarkable setting. There's nothing supernatural or plot significant about this setting. It's just a house. But the parents are such strong characters, and the feeling of safety the boys, and by extension you as the reader, feel in the house are so well painted that when the story leaves the house and goes to what would be the much cooler and more exciting setting of Deep Woods, I was still wanting to know what was going on at the farmhouse with the parents. My biggest fear as the end of the book approached was that the story wouldn't go back to the farmhouse. And I just think that's a real testament to the quality of the writing and the amazing character work done in the book. I did not need the concealed secret laboratory science fiction setting for the science fiction elements to feel real. Unlike a typical superhero story, Omicron is not about normal people who develop superhuman powers and must learn to harness them and reestablish their place in the world. And unlike Stranger Things, it's not about normal people who make friends with supernatural people. It's just about people, and some of those people happen to have superhuman abilities. This is not to say I didn't enjoy the Deep Woods settings or that part of the book. It's just to say that I like how it bucks the usual structure where strange, unexplained things happen to a kid, and it goes unexplained or unexamined until they discover the secret base. Think how Harry Potter doesn't know who he is until he comes to Hogwarts, or how Percy Jackson can't explain who he is until he comes to Camp Half-Blood. In those stories, the fantastical setting becomes a major part of the character and their understanding of who they are. In Omicron, the boys learn that they were created in test tubes from synthetic DNA and only placed in their homes to study the effects of outside factors on them, while their genetic twins were kept at Deep Woods Academy and not exposed to outside influence as a control group, and it has no change on their sense of self. While learning this is shocking to the boys, it doesn't affect their view of themselves or their feelings about the world they grew up in. They never reconsider the Callisters as their parents or must debate whether or not they want to return back home. They never wonder if their powers should be used for good or evil. Deep Woods never becomes their home away from homes, or somewhere they must be to continue to develop and understand their powers. In fact, the boys are shown to have made greater advancements in utilizing their powers than their control group counterparts. The Academy teaches the boys about how they came to be, but they offer no insight on how to further develop their powers or who they are to become. This isn't the only time the book bucks common tropes of the genre, and every single time I think it's to the book's advantage. Not just because it makes the story fresh, but because it improves the story. The kids all have names and not numbers or other dehumanizing labels, as is typical with kids made in a lab. Dr. Stein, the creator of the boys and would-be mad scientist, is shown to be a real person and complex character with multiple motives. Normally, these characters are very one-note. They want money or power or to push science as far as they can with callous disregard for the everyday person. Stein, however, is developed beyond that. While he is a morally gray character, he is shown to care about humanity and about the kids. He is shown to be cold and calculating, placing Coop in the worst possible home life as a baby to test the most adverse conditions on his DNA, but also shown throwing his perfectly separated test group to the wind to protect the boys, bringing them into the academy and revealing everything to them, despite the enormous repercussions that will have on his experiment. He is shown to be opportunistic, creating Karek to be an optimal military soldier, but also thoughtful, creating Cassie to improve the arts, a field of human advancement often overlooked by science. Also, bucking another trope, the doctor has no fail-safe if he loses control of the kids. Early in the book, Coop states his belief that there are only three kinds of people: those who are good, those who are bad, and those who just don't know any better. I like that later in the book, this is challenged, that it is Cooper who views Dr. Stein, a man who clearly knows better and yet is not all good or bad, as a black and white bad person, and Coop, the philosopher of this theory, who struggles to pigeonhole Dr. Stein. So far, I've talked a lot about how well written the characters are, and they are, each one feeling like a unique voice and a real individual. But that is certainly not the only thing I liked about the book. The story itself is also very engaging. The pace is masterful. The book never misses a beat and never becomes predictable or slow. I'm a slow reader, and I read this book in a single weekend, simply because I couldn't put it down. I would tell myself when the story came to a slow spot, I would put the book down and tend to other things, but the book refused to come to a slow spot. At multiple points when reading, I said out loud, "Oh shit," because I fully was engrossed in the story. I had TV reactions to it where I'd be like, "No way," or I'd be like, "Shit, what?" And I would laugh. I was laughing out loud, literally laughing out loud in my office as I read this book. I fully believe a person having heard every spoiler I just spoke would still be transfixed by the story, because the book just refuses to let go of your attention. So these are just some random things I really liked and wanted to mention, and I'm just going to list them off in no particular order. I love Cooper. He's my favorite character. I like the way mental illness is handled in the story, how the doctor wishes to get Chase help and favors rehabilitation. I love at the end when the control group discovers the concept of dogs as pets. I love that Coop is outspoken and polite. It's an odd combination that makes him feel like a real person and not a stock character. I like that Carrick has to be naked to camouflage. That feels like a throwback to the original Invisible Man movie that hasn't really been revisited in modern culture. I like that the book never makes a single gay joke about the boys' relationship or feels any need to specify that nothing gay is going on there, as a lot of media does. I like how the Callisters emphasize talking about your feelings and problems, how that makes them seem like the perfect family rather than just being written as the perfect family. I like the timelessness of the story, how I believe it was set in the present, but yet there was no real technological or cultural references that would make it so it couldn't have been set in a variety of decades. This is random, but There was a part where the characters ate chicken noodle soup and grilled cheese sandwiches, which is a combination I've never heard of before, but the writing made it sound so appetizing, I actually made it, and it was really good. Okay, now for the few things I didn't like, and most of them are just personal things and nitpicks that others probably won't care about or possibly won't even agree with, but these are just things personally didn't do it for me. While I understood how it made sense in the story, there was just something I didn't like about the way Coop would retell his abuse. I know he is a middle school boy, but there was something about it that seemed like it was written by a middle school boy attempting to be shocking and edgy rather than a victim recalling actual memories. Something about the way he says it seems like, even in the context of the book, he is only saying it to get a reaction out of people and not to share his pain or unburden himself. That being said, I did not feel like the abuse was used for shock value. It was well justified in the story and handled with care. I'm not objecting to its presence in the book. I don't know how to perfectly phrase it, but I just found something about the way he would talk about it to be a little cringe and eye-roll inducing. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but if I were to give this book to someone to read, I would feel the need to give some kind of disclaimer that that part is a little whatever, but it should be overlooked. Also, I felt like Coop said he was damaged goods too much. In a book that never dragged, I felt like that phrase was just too repetitive. I didn't like the phrase government peanut butter. As a person who eats a lot of peanut butter and who has also been on a lot of different government food assistant programs, that phrase just makes no sense to me. With some programs like WIC, they give you vouchers to buy specific items, and the supermarket will limit the type of that item you can get. For example, they'll let you get cheese, but you can't get any cheese you like. It has to be one specific brand and one specific type. This means when you go over to other people's houses in similar economic levels as you and you see that cheese, you can kind of just know. I would understand like calling that government cheese. However, I don't know any programs that insist that you buy peanut butter. It seems like he's probably just using food stamps to get the peanut butter, which allows you to buy any food you like. So that would make all your food government blank. That's all. It's a nitpick for sure. But as someone who lives in those programs, it sounded like a made-up attempt to sound edgy about being poor, and it just didn't ring true to me. And that's it. That's really all the criticism I have. So, final recommendation, I strongly recommend this book. It's charming, entertaining, and it's really fresh. I think it's the most engrossed in a book I've ever been. There's a sequel tease at the end, and I can't wait till it comes out.